at the time, when I stepped away, at 30, 31, it was the most courageous thing I had ever done because I was successful at it in other people's eyes. And it's very difficult when other people already, particularly those who love you the most, your family members, your friends, and they already have you pegged in a certain corner on a shelf, looking a certain way, and you kind of say, wait a minute, no, that's not my spot. I actually want to be in another position. That impacts everybody around you. So the people around you, they were not encouraging at all about me giving up law, about me trying to, as far as they were concerned, they were like, you're going from a lawyer to be a teacher? That was just such a disgrace. It was a very difficult thing, but I just knew deep inside, you know, what I was doing was not aligned to why I'm here. And I think I feel so fortunate that I asked and I was able to answer that question, why are you here? Right? Because if I look at it in the bigness of it, we're just passing through and we're here. And I think when we are in flow with why we're here, it feels different. And I know that now. It feels very, very different.
You're listening to the Mission Makers Show, a podcast that inspires humans to get into the mindset of success. My name's Farah Nanji, and I'm the founder of a business in the motorsports industry that explores leadership lessons from things like Formula One. I'm also a DJ and music producer in the underground electronic scene, and a public speaker on key topics like resilience, building high-performance teams, overcoming learning difficulties, and stimulating creativity. And to tie it all together, I love writing thought-provoking content as a journalist for these industries which are so unique in themselves. On this show, I'm sitting down with some of the most inspiring and driven people I've met around the world to talk about their processes, their failures, the lessons they've learned, and how they are truly making an impact for this world. So guys, today I'm really excited to bring on an incredible fellow TEDx speaker onto the show. Her name is Sallyann Della Casa, and her mission is centered around fostering leaders through the soft skills that make us human. In an increasingly automated world where the pace of work is changing so rapidly, our skills in things like communication, collaboration, creativity, and more need to be exceptional. And as you listen to today's show, you'll understand why 80% of C-suite leaders value those skills more than the hard skills that we develop. Sallyann has had a really interesting journey, and we discuss many things on today's show, from breaking out of the expectations set by her family to her experiences as a female founder in tech and her advice for managing personal and professional boundaries.
Ready to rock and roll.
So Sallyann, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you on Mission Makers. Your energy is absolutely infectious, and I cannot wait for our audience to absorb some of your amazing energy and your learnings and just what you've been through in your life.
So I am so excited to be here, Farah. Thank you for having me. And likewise, I felt that the minute I met you, your energy also. So that's very cool. We're very vibes in energy, Farah.
That's very true, and we've only met virtually, so it's quite interesting, isn't it, to read energy on a virtual platform. But anyway, can't wait till the day that we can actually meet in person. Aside from all this, but I want to sort of start off by taking you back to your earlier sort of childhood days and talking about Trinidad and Tobago, which is, I know, where you kind of grew up and holds a special place in your heart. Looking back now, what do you remember about that experience and growing up there?
Oh, wow. So I'm an island girl through and through. And I think that I did not realize that. I left at a really young child, spent a lot of time out in Europe. And, you kind of think that you move on from places. I think most of us that come from developing countries and we kind of go out into the developed world. And it was really interesting that I had gone back several years ago, and it was almost like my body exhaled. And physically, it felt like nowhere else. And that's when I realized the impact that my childhood and being an island girl, it took me all of that time. I think we run away from it so much, those of us, whether it's the islands, a third tier city in India, or whatever it might be. So I'm a proud island girl. Absolutely. And it influences everything about me, everything about me, the way I look at people, the way I look at opportunity. In the islands in Trinidad and Tobago, in the same family, we have Hindus, Muslims, Catholic. We go to church, we go to mosque, we go to, all of those things impacts my worldview.
That's really interesting. I was very surprised by this, and maybe a lot of people know this, but I definitely didn't. I didn't know that East Indians make up the largest ethnic group in Trinidad, followed closely by Africans. So, what role has India played in your life, kind of while experiencing this Indo-Trinidadian relationship?
Absolutely. So, yeah, historically, Trinidad and Tobago under British rule for, the sugarcane, et cetera, was indentured workers. And not only, even though um, uh, there's a large Indian population and there's a large African population, there's also Chinese, Arab. It was occupied by the French and Spanish. So when you see that, and if you look at the actual mixed population, that's about 60%. So it's pretty normal in Trinidad and Tobago. So people, when they see me, they kind of look and they go, someone came from India. And then they go, but there's like something else there. In terms of India, somebody clearly, in terms of my family line, I don't know from which part of India because we don't know. And I don't know if it's my great great grandparents because it's not my grandparents that came from India. And how that impacts me is certainly, when I got to Bangalore the first time several years ago, that exhale I told you that I felt in the Caribbean, I felt it when I went to India and I was not expecting it at all. And I literally landed in Bangalore and somehow, you know, everything just kind of felt so familiar. In India, I'm embraced so much, but this is what they say. They're like, she's really one of us, but she got lost on the other side of the world. That's how they describe me, because certainly when I open my mouth and, my worldview is so different in terms of the culture, but I do celebrate, Diwali. I did with my dad. Um, Growing up, just like I would celebrate, as I said, Eid and go to church with my mom. So that Indian background plays a big role, but not only for someone like me that has, a direct descendant. You can have a complete African family and they celebrate Diwali in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's really very cool, Farah.
And I'm sure the cross-cultural cuisine there is quite interesting as well. There must be some great things that you guys are cooking in the kitchen.
Absolutely. So when you go to India and you taste Indian food, and then you say the Indian food in the Caribbean tastes completely different, it does. Because you're correct. We have Spanish influence, French influence, the Creole influence, the spices are different. So serving Indian food in the Caribbean, we go, is it Indian food or is it our Indian food? Which is really lovely.
You mentioned something earlier about being an island girl. The way you look at people is different. I'm curious about that. What does that mean?
So, you know, first of all, I'm very connected to nature and I'm very connected to our connection to the environment and nature. I'm very connected to we are not things because in the islands, uh, we have, for example, carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, like carnival in Brazil. And it doesn't matter. You can be from the highest class, the lowest class. I mean, carnival in our island started off because of the slaves and they were dancing on the street. And that was the one time they were allowed to affiliate and associate with their landowners. So when I say an island girl view, I see the oneness in all of us, the connectivity in terms of nature, the simplicity of the taxi driver and the wealthiest person sitting in a car sitting on the side of the road, which we do in Tobago, on the seawall and watching the sunset together. There is something super special that I did not realize, as I said to you, until later on in life, that is this island thing. And there's just great simplicity on it in it, and it's the great connectivity of humanness. So anyone who goes to the Caribbean, when do we go to the Caribbean and the islands? On vacation. And when you ask anybody about the experience of being there, they will say, oh my gosh, like there is not all of these, you just let go. There is something about just exhaling and letting go. And I think, that's the beauty of that's the real beauty of humanity, and I think most of us forget that. So that's what I mean by an island girl,
Mm.
Farah.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that with me. How does that then compare to like living in Dubai, where you still have the ocean, maybe not as much nature as a place like the Caribbean, but like, do you feel like how do you feel in that environment?
It's hard. I'm going to be very frank with you. So Dubai is a fantastic place. It's, I'm here because of work. There is an incredible, about 90% of the Dubai population is global. So it's a great global community. You're just in your hallway. If you have 9 apartments, all 9 of you can be from completely different parts of the world. So that's the great thing. But in terms of, you're correct, there's the ocean. But I'll give you an example. So I'm going to go paddleboarding with my girlfriends on Tuesday at 7:30 in the morning. One is from Belgium and the other one is from the Caribbean, like me in Canada. And we get that connectiveness from within ourselves. Now, do people normally do that in Dubai? We are the only ones out there paddleboarding at 7:30 in the morning before we all head into the office. And we're all big corporate, in our other lives, but we kind of do that in the morning just to have that connection, and we kind of go around the Burj Al Arab, and by 10:30 we're all in the office, being suits. Even though the things are there, because the nature, Dubai is not naturally green, so everything is very, very manicured and perfect. Sometimes you just want to mess up the grass a little bit, going, I need some bush to go walking into. It's different. It's different, Farah, right?
Mm,
It's
mm,
completely
mm.
different.
It is definitely. So you did spend some of your childhood as well learning at a boarding school in Switzerland. How did that experience play a part in shaping who you are today?
It was a fantastic experience. I really feel so blessed that my parents were able to send me abroad. Most of my schooling was done abroad outside of the Caribbean. So I have to tell you, the first time I went into Switzerland into boarding school, my roommates were two lovely Arab girls. And it was my first exposure, Farah. Both of them, were very young. At the time, we're not even full-fledged, teenagers yet. And it was the first time I came across people with like incredible wealth. So they were really young, but already with like fur coats and 4 or 5 Rolex watches. And, everyone's parents were sending private planes on the weekend to take us all over the place. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, I'm like the poorest island girl in this whole school. And it really opened up my eyes, in terms of that experience, to just different people and different ways of thought, and different ways people live, and being able to know that I can fit in and thrive anywhere. As I said to you, because coming straight from the islands, I still had my very thick island accent. And we were speaking in the school, in French, Italian, and German, so learning languages. And what was great about our school is that every 6 weeks we would travel to different countries all over the world and spend 6 weeks with families in those countries. So I had the opportunity to live in Germany, live in Russia, live in the most fantastic places, and get, so it shapes your worldview, right? I can truly say to you that you can drop me in the middle of anywhere. You can drop me in the middle of the desert, with a tribe. You can drop me in the finest place in the world with the most sophisticated people, and I just completely can fit in any type of environment. And I think my college, my experience being abroad, being educated in Switzerland and Toronto, has really kind of shaped my ability to be able to go in and out of so many different worlds. Sometimes people are shocked by it. So in the Caribbean, I would have a meeting in the morning with like the prime minister of the country, and in the afternoon be teaching in the jail. And each one of those parties saw me as one of them. And I think that's a beautiful gift, to be able to kind of rally very equally those worlds.
It's almost like being a chameleon. And I definitely resonate with that. My university was 95% global, and that foundation was amazing, just to hear the inner cultures and the, just the things that make people who they are, and have that
Absolutely.
global business perspective. Now I know that a topic that you're very very passionate about is education, and there are a lot of misconceptions, obviously, about private versus public education. At this moment in time, we're speaking and we're undergoing probably the biggest paradigm shift in education that our lifetime has ever seen. What is the reality in your eyes?
So with all the negativity with COVID, I would actually say it has been, on the other extreme, so that, there's always a double-ended sword of everything. It has been the most powerful catalyst for change in education. So the things that those of us in education have been talking about for generations. So, whether it is 30, 40 years, now is coming to pass in a matter of months in terms of the open-mindedness of educators, the open-mindedness of government, the open-mindedness of funders, even parents, right? To be able to go, let's try this, let's try something different. And the reason why it has not worked, whether it's public or private, I think public and private has been fundamentally the same, because the biggest stakeholders, which are parents, teachers, as long, there's been real no incentive to shift or change anything. And educators are not going to change the system if they continue making money off of it the way it is. I mean, that's a reality. Um, so I think what has happened now in both public and private is COVID kind of threw everybody into the same boat. Whether you're public and private, you're now in a home environment, you're now not in that, not in a piece of real estate that somehow makes it look different or sound different. It's right there in front of you, what's happening for parents and teachers with your child. And all the stakeholders are involved on a daily basis, which they're not used to, because parents would just drop their kids off. So they have no, even though they're a stakeholder, they weren't really actively involved. Now everyone is actively involved and everyone can see what the problem is. And it's opened up the door to say, okay, well, what if, right? And that what if is what kind of now allows so many players, whether it's startups, whether it is, those with innovative ideas, to go, let's see what that what if can look like in terms of education. And there's always been this disconnect with education and the workforce, and it's been getting wider and wider. And the reason it's getting wider and wider, Farah, is because traditionally our parents' generation, they would graduate and the value of their degree was a 30-year career or a 50-year career. Today, the value of a degree, you're lucky if it's even worth anything by the time you graduate. That's how fast areas are shifting. I think the World Economic Forum recently said that by 2022, 133 million new emerging jobs will happen. And when I say that, people go, well, what do you mean? And I always say to them, think about the job contact tracer. So a year ago, none of us actually even knew what that even was. In April of 2020, there was 100,000 job vacancies for that job alone in the US, and it pays $34 an hour. That job didn't exist. There's no degree for it. It's all based on, human skills. So I think it's real now for governments, parents, everyone going, wait a minute. I mean, the purpose of education is to, if the measure of success of education is I put a child out there into the world who can get a great job, thrive, be a successful human being, have all the opportunity in the world. Well, if that's the measure, we have pretty much done terrible at it for the last several years. And now is that opportunity in terms of changing it, both public and private. So timing is now, Farah.
It 100% is. And so, talking about graduating and degrees, this is absolutely not normal, because you went to high school and you graduated by the age of 15, but you failed your, oh, you didn't pass your common entrance exams in the beginning.
Yes.
So to do that, and then it didn't stop there because you attained 5 degrees before the age of 21. I mean, this is a phenomenal achievement. How do you look back at that moment? Do you see it as, the educational system is kind of flawed because it puts all this expectation on me, or do you see it as, you were just placed under this huge weight of expectation from your family or your surroundings? How do you kind of
Yeah.
look back at that?
So, I failed the common entrance at 9. And the common entrance is like, if you're under the British system, it's this big exam. I think, it's called the SEA now, you take to get into, I think it would be like considered middle school at that point. And the reason I failed it is I am not a lineal thinker. I'm a divergent thinker. And most test taking is memory work of lineal thinkers, right? Here are the three answers for the one thing. And I am that child who, you give me an essay, I can write all kinds of stuff when I was a kid, come up with all kinds of creative stuff. But my memory is not that great. So I wasn't really good at it. And it was really where it sunk into me, because people are judged by that I wasn't smart. And I think I spent the next 10 years after that, Farah, or, by the time till I was 21, trying to prove to myself and prove to my family that I was smart. I think that's why I collected all of these degrees, because I just never thought I was smart enough. I mean, and it was something just, I would say to you, I've only gotten over in the last 10 years as a grown woman, of going, it's perfectly okay not to know stuff, and raise your hand, and people have the confidence that you know what you don't know and you can go learn it or find the people to supplement that, and that's perfectly okay as a leader. You don't have to know everything. So I think that I only got that confidence in the last 10 years, as an adult. But up until 21, I was just trying to prove I was smart enough. I mean, how horrible is that? That I spent all that time collecting all those degrees just trying to be accepted.
Mm. No, it's very true, and that's where I think the education system is flawed, because it's so much about, age of 3, you need to get into this school and take a test to get in there, and if you don't, your whole life is determined as to where you'll end up, where you could go, what your potential somewhat is, according to who, society, and it's not correct, because exactly, you have to go through this huge internal reflection and journey to gain back that confidence, to allow yourself to thrive, and feel okay to know that you will never know everything. There's just, it's not humanly possible, and that's absolutely okay. So talking about this kind of weight of expectation, I know that you spent many years, almost a decade, working in law, and you felt like you were climbing a mountain that you didn't really want to be on, but you kind of did it to appease your family. So what was the kind of turning points for you to transcend that need to fulfill your family's expectations of you? And do you reflect back on that time now as the catalyst that actually led you to answer your true calling in life?
Sure. So during that time, and as I said to you, I was extremely young. So, I became an attorney at 21. And I would say this for any female, you have no idea who you are at 21. Even though you think you have it all together, I can look back now. But at the time, I thought I had it all together. And I was always, even though I was going through the motions, you became a lawyer, you practiced law, applied for different types of board positions, did very well. I'm a hard worker. What I was doing was a side hustle, volunteering, mentoring and teaching and training and writing curriculum. And I think for most of us, if we look back, and you can only do this looking back, there is always evidence of who you truly are. And if I look back to even when I was 13, I was already at the Make-A-Wish Foundation, volunteering and mentoring all through college. My college roommates would say she was volunteering and all kinds of stuff, training and teaching. And they were like, what the heck do you know to train and teach? It was just that one of my innate, unique gifts is my ability to connect with anybody, right? Remember, of any kind of realm. And I was just searching and looking for that, in terms of that connection with people and whispering to them their potential. So law, I look at it, I often wonder, did I waste that 10 years of my life practicing law? And I would say no, only because now it really sharpened my mind and I see things that others generally do not see because of that experience. And because of the type of law I was into, most of my clients were very sophisticated business people. So I'm able to see a lot of things that most people don't see in terms of doing transactions and running a business, etc. Um, but what did that feel like? It felt, Farah, like, you know how sometimes you see in a shop window like this absolutely fabulous outfit, and when you go and try it on, it's not made for your body, but it looked really great on the window. That's exactly how law felt. It was like trying on an outfit not made for my body type, and it was just uncomfortable. And you just didn't know because I didn't have the vocabulary yet or the confidence or courage in myself yet to identify what was happening. I just made wrong choices about who I was, and who I would become in life. And stepping away from that, I think, is the most courageous thing I've ever done so far. I think that, and having a tech company in India. I mean, maybe that's more courageous now, but at the time, when I stepped away, at 30, 31, it was the most courageous thing I had ever done because I was successful at it in other people's eyes. And it's very difficult when other people already, particularly those who love you the most, your family members, your friends, and they already have you pegged in a certain corner on a shelf, looking a certain way, and you kind of say, wait a minute, no, that's not my spot. I actually want to be in another position. That impacts everybody around you. So the people around you, they were not encouraging at all about me giving up law, about me trying to, as far as they were concerned, they were like, you're going from a lawyer to be a teacher? That was just such a disgrace. It was a very difficult thing, but I just knew deep inside, you know, what I was doing was not aligned to why I'm here. And I think I feel so fortunate that I asked and I was able to answer that question, why are you here? Right? Because if I look at it in the bigness of it, we're just passing through and we're here. And I think when we are in flow with why we're here, it feels different. And I know that now. It feels very, very different.
It really, really does. It just, you flow through effortlessly, no matter what obstacles come. You just, you're like water. It's very fluid. You just move with the ocean. I watched a talk recently where you shared that you have a short lifeline on your hand, and I actually have the same. And throughout my early 20s, I adopted this philosophy of live fast, die young. And I race cars, I do all these crazy things. I have no fear when it comes to taking risk. But as I entered my 30s, I really let go of this belief because I realized it became a huge limiting belief, and I was actually sabotaging maybe my health and like the decisions that you just make. And I'm curious to know about the relationship you have now with your lifeline and how it's guided your inner path.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know you had that. And you know what? Exactly what you said is exactly what I did also. So, I'll give you a funny story about this lifeline. So for me, my mom had this guy come from India when I was a child, and he would read everybody's hand and he put it on a tape. And I think I was like 12 or 13 at the time, and the tape actually said she has this really short lifeline. And it was always, and I interpreted that to mean I'm going to die like at any time, right? I'm going to die really young. And I think we don't realize subconsciously the impact on the decisions we make. Maybe that's why I collected all of these degrees. Maybe that's why I tried to be a grown up, way before. But what was really interesting about it, Farah, and kind of very, it's a great kind of symbol of me letting go, like you let it go. I bought my first life insurance policy when I was 18 years old. I'm not kidding you. I went and I bought $1 million life insurance policy. And I remember the life insurance guy sitting across the table from me, and he's like, but you're 18 years old. Why are you buying a life insurance policy? I will always remember his name. Larry Shuffman was the guy, the insurance guy, because he was just sitting there going like, what are you doing? You're in college. I was in law school actually at the time. I'd already got into my first year of law school. And I'm like, I'm like, my beneficiaries, because I wasn't, my beneficiaries were my parents, right? So I was like, and I would like to leave my mother and my father, and not that they needed anything, but this was the frame of mind that I was in, that I was going to die very young. And I just wanted to make sure, if anything happened, my parents were, and everyone was going to be okay. And here's what I did for it. I paid the insurance policy like for the next 10 years, like upfront. Because I was thinking if anything happens, and at least I know everyone is covered. And I remember when I turned 31, 32, when I left law, I stopped paying the premiums. And I remember Larry called me and he was like, "Well, it's time again," because the 10 years had passed. And he was like, "It's time again to, to pay your premiums." And I said to him, "No, I'm not paying it. I'm going to let it go." And he was like, "Well, you have enough interest. I don't know how insurance works. You have enough interest for it to cover you, for, I don't know, a couple more years. And I'll call you back in a couple more years and you tell me what you want to do." And he called me back after a couple of years and I said, "No, I'm not paying the premiums. I'm actually going to live really long and everybody's going to be fine." It was this letting go of me, like letting go of law, letting go of all of those things. It was just this symbolic thing of going, no, like you're going to be fine. And, any of us can die tomorrow and you have to just let this thing go. So that's what it was for me, Farah. It was, though, up until that moment, you are correct. I was self-sabotaging myself, making decisions, not thinking through what might be the consequences of that, because I didn't think I was going to be around for it.
Yeah, it's so true. It's crazy, isn't it, how these things can have such a big impact on
It's
your
nuts. It's like
subconscious.
literally nuts.
It really is. It really is. Now, a topic that you're incredibly passionate about is human skills and soft skills in particular. You've said in the past that if you think of a human in terms of a house, then the hard skills would be the walls, but the space in between the walls is where you find the human skills. I love that analogy. So, talk to me more about the ideas behind this.
Sure. So let's think about any, for anyone, your audience, or even yourself, any incredible doctor that you know, or any incredible human that you know. And if I were to ask you, why do you think that they stand out? You're not going to tell me because they have a Stanford degree, or they have an Oxford degree, or something relating to some hard. You will tell me most of the times, it's the way they make me feel when I'm around them, or it's the way that they put creatively ideas together. Like, I don't know where they come up with that. It's always the human side of us that makes us exceptional in our unique combinations. It's the quirkiness, that's the weirdest person I ever met, but I love it. Right. So it's always those things. And when you think about any job role today, and the majority of job roles are people facing, right, where we interact with humans, that's where we spend most of our time. We spend most of our time, there's studies, Stanford, Harvard, and Carnegie Mellon has a study out, and even Google through Project Oxygen, 80 to 85% of top performers at Google are not there because of their tech skills. They're there because of their human skills, right? Things like coaching, things like empathy, things like, listening. The same in terms of the study. So most jobs and most roles out there, 85% of the success is human skills. The reason why we have not really focused on them is that we take it for granted that we all have them. And, if I were to say to you, how many not so great communicators do you know? We know a lot of them, right? Or how many people you know that are not creative? We know a lot of people who are not creative, right? We just take it for granted. That's one. And number two, those who are, or if we're teaching those things, we don't know how to measure them. So, how do I measure that, Farah is very results oriented, so really good with self-direction? Or how do I measure, Farah has a unique combination of creative thinking and critical thinking? So there's never really been a measure, which is, where, I focus my time in terms of kind of developing that patent on that measure. So the human skills is the driver. And I think as we go more into a world where we don't know, there's a Dell Technologies study that says 85% of the jobs of 2030, we don't know what they are. I mean, and you just have to look at the emerging jobs, right? The 133 million over the next 2 years. We don't know what the hard skills are. So do I go learn Python, or do I go learn, if I'm in tech, or do I go learn to know those things? But I pretty much know, as a human coming to the table, I might need to communicate, collaborate, critical thinking. I need some emotional IQ. So those are the given. That's the thread. That's the given. So let's focus on those areas. And that's why I focus on those areas, Farah.
It's amazing what you've designed with Gleek. I'm in awe of how you've kind of created this incredible system through AI to actually measure these skills. Um, Here's a question for you that
Sure.
I'd love to get your perspective on. Do you believe there is a connection between astrology and the soft skills that a human might be more innately drawn towards?
Hmm.
Have you ever
That's
thought
an
about that?
interesting. No, never really thought about that. So, um, if I look at, so we all come with, just like astrology, you know how in terms of astrology, we all have some kind of alignment to something, whether it is water, stars, earth. Um, it's the same with human skills. All of us have a knee-jerk alignment with something that comes very, very natural to us. So there's some people, they don't have to make effort, and there's some things that we come with. So for me, it would be my communication and my empathy. It comes, I don't have to practice that. I've had it since I was a child. For someone else, it might be something else. So I think if I look at it from a human perspective, of some of the things are very innate to us, just like in astrology, some of the things, absolutely, it's how we arrived, right? So the time of our birth, aligns to, I think there are certain things in human skills that is innate to us. However, I will say this big however, which is very different from astrology. So astrology is very static, right? You don't change anything in astrology. Today it's not like you're the year of the ox today, and tomorrow you're the year of the rat. And if you are a water sign, you're always going to be a water sign. Versus, so there's a certain staticness with astrology. With human skills, it's, if I were to ask you, how many people do you know who have talent and got nowhere? We all know so many people without talent. That it's the same thing with human skills. If you don't practice it and you don't sharpen it, it becomes very dull. And those people who don't have it naturally, just like an athlete who works on something and they sharpen it, they can actually get really good at it. So, unlike astrology, that's static, the human skills is very dynamic. It's in your hands and in your control in terms of what it is. You come with certain facets that are natural to you, but if you don't polish it, sharpen it, practice it, just like habit, it will not really, kind of get you anywhere. So I think that would be the differentiator for me,
Mm,
Farah, in the
mm,
both.
mm. Yeah, definitely. I think having the self awareness is key, but then obviously being aware of how it could define, like, how it could manifest in your life, and also what that, because there's obviously positives and negatives to each thing. So being aware of what you could be more, what could be your limiting, what could hold you back. That is interesting to kind of observe. So you've talked a little bit about the World Economic Forum, and just to add there that they rank skills, these soft skills such as creativity and critical thinking, as number 2 and 3 for the top skills that employees will need to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution. Hey you, we hope you're enjoying today's episode. We're on a serious mission here to create one of the world's best podcast series, and we'd be so grateful if you could support us in any way by becoming a patron of the show. There's a tier to suit every level, from early bird tiers where you get downloads to all my music with some super cool ninja stickers, to our VIP Mission Maker tiers where you get epic rewards like exclusive footage that never gets aired, the chance to submit questions to our guests with signed copies of books from them, DJ lessons, one-to-one coaching, and a whole load of super cool Ninja and Mission Maker merchandise. You can start supporting us for less than what it costs you to fill up your car for a month by simply heading over to www.patreon.com/Mission Makers. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. So, why do you think that companies cut budgets towards developing these skills? Is it because there hasn't been that measurement, very direct measurement in place? But when, in fact, these are the ones that they struggle the most with in terms of their employees and developing this culture amongst their teams.
So I think measure is one facet of it. The second part of it is, if you look out there, there are not a lot of people teaching it really well. So it's not like hard skills learning, in terms of the human skills, where you go in and it's memory work. So, think about it, right? If I'm going to learn digital marketing, I go in, I can take a weekend course or a course on Udemy, I get some right or wrong answers, and Human skills, it's the application. So it requires, there are three things required for human skills to actually learn it and measure it. And it is, you have to come to it often. The degree of difficulty of application changes, and you must have a feedback loop. It requires way greater effort. So I think for corporates, the lack of measure means they can't tie it to an item in their balance sheet or their in terms of their statement, right? So number one, there's that aspect. I can't measure it. Like, do you have an A in critical thinking or creativity? Like, how do I measure that in terms of your KPIs? And then number two, well, why is it that you just can't go to a weekend leadership in a weekend course in leadership and become a leader? And it doesn't work that way either, right? So there is this idea of how do you make it habit and practice. It requires greater investment. So I think the combination of the both, it's a harder nut to crack. And certainly it's not low hanging fruit. And I think that's why corporates have a hard time with it.
Very interesting. So, do you think that COVID has actually had a negative effect on people's soft skills, or do you think, as we alluded to earlier, it's one of the most profound times to change things and particularly test our humanity and focus on reskilling ourselves and really realizing deep within ourselves if what we've, dedicated our life or our time to has really been fulfilling us?
So I think it's the best time for human skills. This particular, I can tell you prior to COVID, it's been a couple of years I've been working on this, and people have been wondering, I'm sure when I see them, I get all excited talking about it. They were like, what has she been smoking? Right? Because literally nobody was very excited until COVID. And then COVID happened, and then all of a sudden the biggest companies in the world, I feel so honored and humbled are having conversations with me going, that's what you've been up to. So I think if anything, COVID kind of leveled the playing field and brought us back to the really kind of simple, as I said to you, it's no longer your title and you're in a big office and you're all the ornaments of what success. Everybody is on a Zoom call in their homes, needing to have human connections and connect with each other. And it really kind of brought some humility back and us to really kind of self-examine and go, wait a minute, this has been missing all along. So it's the best time now. And if you look globally, there's a huge movement happening in this, right? So you see for the first time schools really looking at, we have like Western Governors University, that's the first competency-based type of university. We have many high schools, looking at social and emotional learning as a core part of curriculum. We have so many startups being funded in the area of, just this whole area of human skills, soft skills, social and emotional learning. So I think COVID has been great for bringing us back to this, which is a really crucial thing when it comes to the labor market, right? Because this is what the labor market, if you look at what they've been saying, they've been missing and where they're spending their training dollars. If you look at the LinkedIn training reports, it's all on the human skills that most of the spend is happening because students are not coming out with those skills, well honed and well sharpened.
Particularly when it's you don't have this opportunity to develop it face to face. It's very hard in a digitalized context to develop that collaboration and all those types of things. Talking about big companies, you have currently got a huge contract with the World Expo in the skills approach for their conference attendees. This is amazing. I heard somebody say recently it was like the Olympics of business. So what does this bid mean for you?
Sure. So my contract is with Dubai Cares, which is the UAE government arm that kind of does a lot of outward work in education globally. And it's the Future is Human Pavilion, and we are powering the whole, all 25 million plus visitors to Expo. They will get benchmarked on jobs of the future, and then they will get upskilled for those jobs of the future for 3 to 6 months. It's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal because, a couple of things. You're correct. It's like the World Fair is where the biggest innovations of, the world kind of come, many of them have come out of world fairs. Number two, the fact that we will have, as a startup, 25 million users on our product applying human skills to workplace situations means we will have the largest data lake of application of human skills in workplace situations that would exist. What does that mean? Jobs of the future. So those job boards that we have now, like LinkedIn and Indeed and Monster. I mean, we all know resumes are the worst, absolute worst predictor of performance. Those job portals are not going to exist in their current forms a couple years from now, particularly with automation. So there are many things that's going to be automated. And how do I find a human with the right combination of human skills? How do I find that? That's the data set that we're building coming out of Expo. It is a crucial data set of where someone, in the perfect world, I should be able a couple of years from now to go into Google and put, DJ, creative, great communicator, and Farah should come up, right? And then I can go look at your degrees, and then I can go look at all of those other things. But the ability to look at your quality of thought as a human and how you apply that in situations is how we are actually going in the future, I truly believe. How it is we're going to identify humans for jobs, projects, side hustles, whatever it is we want to call what that gig economy would look like in the future. And as of right now, we're one of the very few very focused on that.
Mm, that's so excited. I'm so excited for you and the data that's gonna you're gonna gather throughout this whole process. Um, I remember a few years back you mentioned how a 21-day entry interview could pay dividends for new starters and your company. We have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this show, and I think it would be amazing if you could share what does a sort of 21-day structure look like, and what's the kind of impact that can arise from that.
Sure, sure. You're talking about my thesis paper at Harvard, and we made it into a publication. I was so excited about it. So what we talked about, I mean, I want you to think about it. Anyone new coming to a situation does not come with all the bias you and I would have. And certainly for your startups, I mean, for me, I'm a startup founder also. And it's always interesting because we are so thick in the forest most of the times and so close to product and people, and we're deeply flawed as humans, all of us. None of us are kind of miss this train with all of the bias and all the filters of how we see things. That having a new hire, having them kind of giving them free reign to look throughout the company and just point out for you things that they're seeing that you are missing completely, is probably the greatest asset you would have with a new hire. And so many times, particularly for big companies, we don't do that, right? We kind of pigeonhole someone new into a particular role, and we want to start telling them what to do versus going, wait a minute, this is new set of eyes, providing you hire someone who's competent, who, all of the, things that you're looking for, who could look at something and go, well, why are you guys doing stuff that way? Or can you explain to me? Because it gives you an idea of what user experience might look like in terms of product and things you're missing, process that might be missing, that completely, so this is why I felt, in terms of that, that article that you read, that 21 days of someone coming in new to a company is so crucial. And if you give them free reign across even areas not in their domain, put them in the finance department, even if they have no financial background, just to see what they say, because you might be just missing things, right? Cross domain knowledge is, a gold mine. You don't have to be from a particular area to kind of notice something and go, why is that happening? And I think that's what I was trying to get across with that article is, those clean eyes looking at something you're working on going, here's a spot that you missed, the blind
Mm.
spot or the hidden area.
Mm, very interesting. It's almost like, yeah, being in like almost like being a child and like having no bias, and just kind of like exploring it with a complete curiosity. And
Absolutely.
yes, and definitely that's very interesting. I hope some people will take away some very interesting thoughts on that and implement that in their own companies, and things like that. The last question I want to ask you around this sort of topic is that compassion is very important in leadership, and yet many leaders struggle with actually developing this, and sometimes their workplaces become places of cyberbullying, and they don't have very positive environments. What do you think is one of the first things a leader should do to cultivate a culture of compassion?
Wow. So one, as a leader, you're not always, you have to also be forgiving on yourself, that you're not always going to be the most compassionate leader, I think. And I think if you start from that place of everyone is entitled to have a bad day, even including you, and you create a workplace that is vulnerable enough to allow people to raise their hands and be able to say that, um, uh, that's a start in terms of a compassionate. So often I think, not being able to just recognize that we're humans, and we're going to walk in with all kinds, each of us have all kinds of baggage and all kinds of emotions. And I have days where I actually say to my team, I'm really having a bad day, it's not a great day to talk to me. And they will, they send me chocolates, or they send me, like, just virtual stuff, and they're like, okay, we're not talking to her today, like it's not happening today. But I need to be able to do that, with my team. I have a fairly young team, because then I give them permission themselves to also do that. And I think part of that compassionate leader is giving us space to just be, right? To not leave any parts of ourselves at the door. And if you allow people to walk in with their full selves, it's going to be messy. It's not going to be perfect. People are going to have bad days, and that's the beauty of being human, and be very kind of forgiving with each other. So always start from a place. One of the things I often tell them is, start from a place. If someone is upsetting you, and if something doesn't feel right, ask a question from a place of curiosity versus blame. So instead of going, that was really terrible, I think, da da da, and you start kind of coming down on someone, from a place of curiosity, I wonder what you were thinking when you did, whatever. And curiosity then allows that person to exhale and not be defensive. And that's a great act of compassion. So coming from a place of curiosity, I think also coming from a place of vulnerability and showing that, you need compassion also. So I can tell you, as a leader, I have recently said to my team, why is it that nobody ever asked me if I'm having a good day? And they were kind of taken back by that. And I said, because, it shouldn't be that I have to come to stand up every single day making sure everyone is okay. I said, maybe I would love if someone checks in on me during the day and go, how are you doing? Are you having a great day? Is everything okay? So I think also being vulnerable as a leader, and also, showing what you need and asking for what you need, even if it's from a place, a vulnerable place, I think it's very important, and an act of, for them, of compassion. And the third part is, as I said to you, leaving them the room to be able to just be who they are, right? And voice up and speak up when you need space and room, and not leave parts of themselves at the door. So that would be the three things I would say to you, Farah, in terms of compassion as a leader.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's so profound. And yeah, it's amazing how so many people just don't ask, how are you? And you ask them that question back. I think it's, it should just, you should always ask that question back. You're having, it's a two-way relationship, and both people have invested a lot of time and energy to be in that space. And it has
Yeah.
to be held with the same level of care and respect. And also something that you said there that we were having a chat about earlier about, taking the space away. And sometimes some of the hardest things as a founder of a startup is like, you're developing this culture, this DNA in your organization that reflects you. And there's so much when you're a founder that you have to be in so many different areas, so many different hats. And it's what you sort of said to me earlier about just letting go, and like letting your team take over that, and kind of just detaching yourself from the process, but yet your spirit is still embodied through how they communicate, how they deliver the customer experience, or whatever it is. So very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I love this quote of yours as well that you said about your quality of yeses increases by all the things you say no to, and you actually have a specific not to do list, which I absolutely love. By the way, most of us have to do lists. Whoever thought let's have a not to do list, and
Yes.
that also that also means being quite guarded about who enters your space, which is also very important.
Yeah.
So why do you think people struggle to say no, and what do you think that says about the way humans are programmed?
Sure. And I love that. I recently had to do that again and remind myself to do that. We just started the year and I was really getting burned out. And it was just the fourth week of January. And I realized it was the fourth week of January and I had done, I think, 8 speaking gigs. Plus, my pipeline in business I had to bring in was like $250,000. Plus, I'm building product. Plus, I mean, I was literally at that breaking point. I was not exercising. And I just reminded myself, and I went to my EA and I said, cancel everything. So, by the way, Farah, you're the only thing I'm doing this month in terms of
Oh, oh my
external.
God,
I
I feel
literally
honored.
canceled everything off. She's like, are you
Jeez.
sure? And I said, yes. I'm just like, I need
Oh.
to and I started training again twice a week, just to be able to get back to center, and it comes from this space, Farah. You cannot give what you do not have within you. And if you show up at 50% because you're overworked, it doesn't matter if you spend 10 hours or 20 hours doing something, all you can give is that 50%. And if you really want to autograph your presence, your work, like a Picasso painting, and that's what I earnestly want to do. I think my customers deserve that. I think my employees deserve that. I think anybody who turns their time and attention, even yourself today, I owe it to you to show up at my 200% that can be autographed. It means I have to make sure that I do whatever it takes that allows me to do that. And that involves saying no to things that you might genuinely say yes to appease, to look good, to be accepted, to the list goes on. Whether it's family, workplace, there's a 99 list of people and the higher you get up in the ladder, the more the requests will be, right? So that's one. Number two, for me also, it's guarding my personal space. So, I do believe I am that average of the 5 people I spend the most time with. And I have to be really guarded about, even though you're running a company, sometimes you don't want to be around the energy of certain people, even in your own organization, right? Because remember, human beings they might just be having a bad day or a bad week. And you have to pick up on that. And because I'm a very open energy, I absorb. I have not learned that gift yet of blocking my energy. So many people have told me that.
Mm.
So I can come out of talking to someone and feel like a steamroller just rolled over me because I've just absorbed. If they had negativity on them, if there was, some people are great and, they shield, but I think that's the double-edged sword of having the gift of connecting with people is because you're so
Mm.
open. I can connect in a minute at the deepest level with someone, but it's because of that openness. It's the same way if that person had negative energy, I absorb that immediately. So I protect my space. I spend a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time like in nature, hugging trees, exercising. I recently visited this weekend the Expo Pavilion that just opened up the sustainability, and I literally went and I hugged a tree, and I'm like, you get me.
Mm.
So it goes back to who do you want to be in the world and how do you want to show up? And that, if I use that as my kind of my true north, then I can do, the not to do list. And I've learned that no is a complete statement. So I don't even have to give an explanation. Can you do da 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 da? And I go, no. And it's a complete statement and it's okay. So I encourage everybody to
Mm.
get, that. And I have to remind myself, I'm not perfect at it yet. I have to keep reminding myself also on that list, as I just told you.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely quality versus quantity, and a huge part of nature playing a big role in that as well, to remind
Sure.
yourself to stay grounded to that, to your plate, really. Being a female tech founder, still not so common in our world today. But people like you are turning the wheel for things like that to happen, which is amazing. So, what advice do you have for women who would like to pursue a career in tech, and start their own businesses within this field?
Sure. So I would say to you that, remember, I've gone through one career already. So I'm going to kind of address those females who have gone through one career. For me, it was law. I don't come with a tech background. The fact that I can have a tech company, I have a patent filed on an algorithm that I'm not really even good at math. Anybody can do it if I can do it. And I think that um, knowing, that self awareness of knowing what I was really good at and what I was really weak at, and surrounding myself with a team of people to complement that. Any female today, I don't care, what age you are, what background you have, you are able, and I think the world we live in today, most of us are going to be involved in tech in some way or another. um, uh, it's hard. I mean, it's darn hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, running a tech company and, having a tech team in India. And there's, cultural differences, and there's all kinds of stuff that breaks all the time, and understanding what a tech stack is and APIs and you name it. Hardest thing I've ever done. But how fulfilling. How fulfilling to know, if you asked me this question 3 years ago, would you be running a tech company today? I would have laughed at you. And the fact that I'm doing it, and I'm stretching tall, wide. I wake up every morning kind of going, holy crap, what did I get myself into? But I'm having the time of my life, Farah. And I encourage any woman out there, if you have just that whisper in your soul that says there's something there and it might involve tech, and even if you have no background in it, I would say go look.
Yes, very, very solid advice. Okay, so we've got, moving into the next section of our interview, we've got a little Q&A from our audience who've sent in a couple of questions. So Ali asks, what can children of conservative backgrounds do to help their families let go of the societal driven expectations that they may come from?
So, I did a graduation speech on this one time, and
Oh,
and
no way.
here's the advice I gave to, the kids and the parents. When our parents, conservative parents, say to us, "I would like you to be," let's look at the traditional careers, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. What they're really saying is, "I would like you to be respected. I would like you to have financial freedom. I would really like you to do something that makes a difference to others in the world." And I think if you can get the conversation to, I can do those things and also be in my area of strength, and that might be a musician, and that might be a chef, or that might be a drone pilot, or that might be something else. It's just that we don't have the vocabulary, and in many times the vocabulary of expressing that. But that's really what a parent, and every parent wants that for their child, right? Every parent wants their child to be respected, have financial freedom. They just don't have the vocabulary to go, well, what would that look like and sound like in something that I'm not really sure what that looks like and sounds like. So I think being able to express it with that vocabulary, being also as a child very expressive, kind of showing them the differences. And if you're also aware of your strengths and the things that bring you joy, I think a lot of times we hide those parts of ourselves. I'm the perfect example of that, right? We hide the parts of ourselves, and it's part of that self-awareness, right? Well, when I started becoming self-aware of it, I was able to then have a vocabulary about it, and to be able to go, no, I like that and not like that. So I think if we take the time sooner in terms of to have that vocabulary and to be able to be self-expressive about it, we have a better chance of being able to choose what we would like to, sooner rather than later. And I think we live in a world now, Farah, with our children. So for me in my 20s, I thought I was going to be a lawyer for the rest of my life. I think in a world right now where, even if you're from conservative parents, I think most parents are aware that you're not supposed to have it all together in your 20s anymore. I think that's fairly across the board. So I think there's a lot more room, whether you're from conservative parents or not, to figure stuff out. And most people are then kind of settling down and getting a little serious, maybe in their early 30s, mid 30s. So I just think timing now is also very different, right? Versus, as I said, I remember being 21 or 22, and Farah, you're going to laugh at this, but coming from a Asian background, I remember my grandmother looking at me going, "You're not married yet. Your face will get very hard and no man will marry you." And that was the concern, right? I think we're no longer in that time. And I just think there's a lot of time to experiment now for young people, even conservative families.
Definitely. And there's so many more role models to look up to. The internet has shared that, has hopefully
Absolutely.
enlightened.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, next question comes in from Jessica, and she says, you worked with the famous author behind the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Great book, by the way, Robin
Yeah.
Sharma. Are you now part of the 5 a.m. club? What does your morning routine look like? And what were your key takeaways from that experience of working with him?
Sure, sure. So when I was doing my, and it wasn't The Monk Who Sold the Red Ferrari, it was one of his other books that I read back. It was him and Tim Robbins I read in my late 20s when I was trying to make my next step, my next big move. I think Tony Robbins, it was The Giant Within, if I'm not mistaken. Unwaken the Giant Within or Unleash the Giant
Mm,
Within or something
mm,
along those lines. It
mm,
was thick, thick book. And how I met Robin, I actually wrote to him and I said to him, I had a foundation at the time, and I said, I really would love for you to come to the Caribbean. And I would like to throw some workshops to kids, the government, adults. And his business manager, Jason, wrote me back. And, the world is so funny and small, Farah. Jason happened to be my same age group. And, where I went to boarding school in Toronto, he went to the boys' boarding school next door. So we knew the same people. And they came to the Caribbean. And that's how I ended up meeting Robin. And he had some events for the foundation, also with the government and with the public. He's a very private person. So this is what I will tell you about authors and books and having that experience in terms of Robin. So his book had a huge impact on me personally. So that's number one. Number two, having that, I reached out to the author, and here I had an author who got back to me and actually I met and actually had a business relationship with, which is a beautiful thing. Number three, we expect the authors of our books to be what they write. And I think a lot of times that's like the biggest. So that was one of the first things I learned was like, okay, they're not exactly like what they write in the book. It's a topic that they're writing about. And Robin is a beautiful person, but I really got to know the team around him. So he was very self-aware of who he was, and he's extremely introverted, does not talk to anyone, really kind of closes up, in terms of showtime. So when he's on stage and when it's showtime. But prior to that, he locks himself away from the world. But very self-aware to have a team that I became very good friends with the team. Even today, I'm still friends with this particular team. He is what inspired me to write my own book. So many beautiful things came out of that, Farah, of just reading a book and being deeply touched by the book and getting curious and going, let me reach out to this person. So yeah, very positive things.
definitely. Well, it's only ever one email or one call away, and you never know who will answer back, and how a very interesting or a beautiful relationship can manifest itself. So definitely very good. So we're going into the final part of our chat today. It's a quick fire round, 60 seconds on each
Sure.
question. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, I'm going to name some notable females who are changing the world, and I just want you to tell me the first word that pops into your head.
Sure.
Cool. Okay. Michelle Obama.
Badass.
Greta Thunberg.
Green.
Okay, and last one, Malala Yousafzai. Yousafzai, sorry.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking, nice. Okay. How would you define genius?
Um, Being able to see around corners.
Nice. What are you currently reading, if any?
5 books at a time. I'm always reading.
Okay. What are you most afraid of?
Settling.
Very interesting. What was the last song that you listened to?
Yesterday, Maroon 5, Sky Full of Stars.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, and the final question is that I know you like to start every day with the same 2 words, thank you. So today, Sallyann, what are you thankful for?
I'll use my 5 fingers. I often have kids trace it, and each finger represents a gratitude I have. So today I'm grateful that it's 25 degrees outside in Dubai and sunny. I'm grateful that I got a cute haircut. I'm grateful that I feel thin and I worked out this morning. I'm grateful that I'm going to have an amazing cup of tea right now. And Farah, I'm in gratitude that we are having this moment together.
Oh, thank you so much. That was amazing. I learned so much from talking to you today, and that's what I actually love about doing these podcasts is I get to learn so much from the people that I really resonate with, and yeah. So thank you, Sallyann. Really appreciate the time that you've given us today, and particularly that you haven't taken any other calls and stuff outside of life and work. So I'm really grateful that you allowed us to enter your space today. We will obviously be sharing all the links where you can catch up with Sallyan's work, and particularly her platform Gleek, which is absolutely amazing. So yeah, thanks a lot, Sally.
Farah, thank you wholeheartedly, and to your audience, thank you for giving me, if you got this far and you listened all through it, I want to thank you
Definitely.
wholeheartedly, sending you huge hugs, digital hugs to all of you.
I loved hearing Sallyan's journey and the incredible advice she gave throughout the show. I'm definitely going to start writing a not to do list. I love that. Her energy was just infectious, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it too. We've got some amazing guests coming on the show this season, so be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. Thank you again for listening. You can reach out to us at Mission Makers or at dj.n1nja on Instagram. And if you're interested in supporting the show and getting some cool rewards like DJ lessons and life coaching, don't forget to visit www.patreon.com/Mission Makers.